Good afternoon to you. Happy Thursday. I'm Fox 26 meteorologist Ramisha Shade. Let's track the tropics. It is that time. Of course, during hurricane season, we give you these tropical updates daily so that you can be aware and keep track of exactly what is happening, what's cooking out there in the Atlantic basin. Of course, that's the Atlantic Ocean, the Caribbean Sea, and the Gulf of Mexico. Of course, earlier on in this season, we were hit by Hurricane Beryl here in Houston. Since then, it's been fairly quiet for us, but now we've got another hurricane brewing out there. This is Hurricane Ernesto. Of course, it did produce some significant impacts to parts of the U.S. Virgin Islands and the British Virgin Islands before pushing into parts of Puerto Rico, kind of brushing by Puerto Rico. But even though it wasn't a direct hit for Puerto Rico, Ernesto, as a tropical storm, produced up to 10 inches of rain for parts of Puerto Rico. At one point, reports of over half of the island of Puerto Rico without power. So things are improving for Puerto Rico as this hurricane pulls away, but you can see that it is getting better organized here, and you can clearly see that eye developing and that eye wall. So the structure of this hurricane certainly looking a little bit more impressive today. It is tapping into that warm water that acts as fuel for this tropical system. And guess what? It's getting better organized. Pressure continues to fall and wind speeds are going up slowly but surely. So that pressure down to 972 millibars and the wind currently at 85 miles per hour. But of course, gusts could be even stronger than that. So Ernesto now moving to the north at 13 miles per hour. Of course, yesterday it was still on a northwesterly track, looking like it could maybe get close to the U.S., but as expected, it has shifted to the north and it will stay away from the U.S. This is the latest 4 p.m. advisory, and this is the latest track that we have to give to you. You can see that it is rolling to the north, and it is likely going to push very close to Bermuda late Friday through Saturday. Forecasts are calling this to be very close to a major hurricane as it brushes by Bermuda, likely anywhere from 110 to 115 miles per hour. So there could be a major hurricane impacting Bermuda, or at least getting very close to Bermuda, likely passing just to the west of Bermuda throughout the day and night on Saturday. Then as we go into Sunday, it will weaken a little bit as it pushes farther to the north, and I think by Monday and Tuesday it's getting fairly close to some of those eastern provinces up into Canada like Newfoundland, Nova Scotia. So we'll have to watch and see what impacts are going to be felt there. As far as the U.S. is concerned, for that mid-Atlantic coast, for the northeast coast, there will be a moderate risk for those dangerous rip currents for swimmers over the weekend. So if you are heading in that direction, or if you have friends, family that are there, make sure that you tell them to be very careful, because there will be an increased surf potential and a higher threat for those dangerous rip currents, but no widespread major impacts from Hurricane Ernesto, because it will stay pretty far away from the U.S. The reason we've got a big heat dome, or big area of high pressure, basically sitting over Texas, covering much of the southeastern U.S., that will help to keep Ernesto away from us. We've got a trough over parts of Canada and dipping into parts of the northeast U.S. That will kind of help to pull Ernesto to the north and steer it north away from us. And then we got a big area of high pressure sitting across the central portion of the Atlantic. So we do expect Ernesto to continue to push to the north. And then once it gets closer to Canada, it may slow down just a little bit as it kind of runs into this area of high pressure in the central Atlantic. But the bottom line, the features in the atmosphere steering this system will keep it away from the east coast of the U.S., and these features will keep it away from the Gulf of Mexico. So certainly some very good news, because we've already been hit once by Hurricane Beryl this season, and hopefully that will be it. But of course, we've still got a long way to go. We've still got the remainder of this month, all of September, which is typically the busiest month of hurricane season, and even into October, things can still get pretty busy for us. So we will continue to watch it closely. For now, though, Ernesto is our problem. So let's check out our exclusive Fox model and show you what's happening with Ernesto. 5 p.m. this evening. You can see it pushing away from those Caribbean islands. Of course, it did brush by some of those northeast Caribbean islands, and it's staying far away from the Florida Peninsula and from the Carolinas. Of course, Carolinas picked up a ton of rain. 1 to 1.5 feet of rain for parts of the Carolinas from Debbie, which was briefly a hurricane. So Ernesto staying away from some of those areas hard hit by Debbie, pushing to the north. You can see Friday evening, it is going to be getting close to Bermuda and likely by Saturday passing just to the west of Bermuda. But you can see that well-defined eye, that center of circulation, the structure of this looking pretty good. It looks like it's going to be fairly healthy as it pushes dangerously close to Bermuda. Leaving Bermuda, like I said, it is going to push into some slightly cooler water as it pushes north, and it likely will be very close to some of the Canadian provinces early next week. I don't think it's going to be a direct hit, though, for Canada, but maybe some impacts being felt. As far as the 2024 Atlantic hurricane season so far, we've had 5 named storms. Alberto, which was a tropical storm that made a Gulf Coast landfall. Of course, we had Beryl, which at one point was a Category 5 hurricane and of course hit the Houston area as an 80-mile-per-hour Category 1. We briefly had Tropical Storm Chris. A lot of you probably didn't even notice because we were talking about Beryl so much, and it was a very short-lived storm that made a Gulf Coast landfall in Mexico. And then of course we had Debbie, which reached Category 1 hurricane status. And this week we've got Ernesto, which is currently a Category 1 hurricane. So next on the list would be Francine, then Gordon. Then we go down to the second panel of names: Helene, Isaac, Joyce, Kirk, Leslie, Milton, and Nadine. And then we have even more all the way down to William. We are still thinking that it is going to be an extremely busy remainder of the hurricane season. So it's not out of the question that we get through that entire list of names. Hopefully we won't, but it is something that we are monitoring closely. We are still expecting an above average season. Normally, for an average hurricane season, we'd have about 14 named storms, out of those 7 becoming hurricanes, and out of those 3 becoming major hurricanes. But for this season, Colorado State University forecasters, as of this month, updating that forecast to 23 named storms, 12 hurricanes, and 6 major hurricanes. As you can see, that is well above the norm. NOAA forecasters also thinking the exact same thing. They're thinking August, September, October, maybe even into November, going to be an unusually busy season. So a remainder of the season calling for 17 to 24 named storms, 8 to 13 hurricanes, and 4 to 7 major hurricanes. Now, the Colorado State University forecasters also came out with some other interesting forecasts. They're talking about the chance of a major hurricane hitting the U.S. East Coast. And for the remainder of this 2024 season, they're thinking there's about a 56% shot of a major hurricane striking the U.S. coastline. That's above 50%. So yeah, that is a little scary. So of course, that's why we are monitoring things closely, because we're still thinking there could be one of these storms blow up and become a big time major hurricane and bring very large impacts to the U.S. Now let's break this down into sections. What are the chances of a major hurricane striking along the east coast of the U.S.? That would be from the Florida east coast all the way up to Maine. Well, the chance for that right around 30%, so a little bit lower, but that's still a 1 in 3 chance basically. The chance of a major hurricane hitting the U.S. Gulf Coast, of course, that could potentially impact us. Well, that chance right at 38%. So there is still a decent chance we could get more action. Like I said, we are heading into the part of hurricane season that is typically the busiest. So we all need to be prepared, stay aware, be ready to jump into action just in case we do get some tropical trouble heading our way. Nothing right now, and I think we should stay fairly quiet, at least for our area, for the next week. However, we're getting closer and closer to that peak of hurricane season, which is right around September 10th. So we certainly want to make sure that we are ready to go. Even if these systems take a turn at the last minute, make sure you have your hurricane gear ready to go. Make sure you know your evacuation routes, and make sure you have your insurance updated and protected. Make sure those papers are in a safe place just in case we do get hit again. But bottom line, for the next week, I think things are quiet for the Houston area. But of course, if you have friends, family in Bermuda, if you're planning to travel to Bermuda, big time problems with Hurricane Ernesto expected over the next couple of days, with Bermuda currently under a hurricane warning.